we only have one item on the agenda, so I'd rather not clear it. We'll continue on. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Crystal Felix, who's going to present the fiscal year 2025 budget for board action.
Great, thank you. I always like to start off by making sure everybody knows this is a very collaborative effort amongst all the management team. If it wasn't for their input, it would be very difficult for Jay to do her part as well as myself. Jay is amazing. She's been our controller for a number of years, and I don't know what I would do without her. And she put in a ton of effort to help get this done. Even with me out on a leave for a little while, she powered through. So I appreciate all her effort, the directors, the managers, the supervisors, and hopefully what you've had a chance to look at, you can have an appreciation for, because it takes a lot of work to get it done. So to start off, I'd like to just kind of hit some highlights from the executive summary, a little reflection on fiscal year 24, as well as some looking forward at 25. I will say 24 is going to end on a very high note. Our numbers should be pretty strong, which is quite amazing. This will be the first time in Tahoe Forest's history that we will have exceeded $300 million in net revenue, not gross, net. So the growth this organization has seen over the years has been tremendous, and I can only thank our community and our patients, because if it wasn't for them having trust and faith in us as their healthcare system, we would not be reflecting these types of numbers to be able to be sustainable for them in the future. So I really want to give a great deal of appreciation to our local community for the financial strength we've been able to hold on to. We have been on a journey with our partner Vizient, working on management systems and our Access to Care project. We are also embarking on another project with Vizient to bring management systems into our behavioral health service line. So this is really targeted to help streamline our processes, provide consistency, have a very smooth process for our patients to access our services. And so we continue to make financial investment in this area to continue to refine these areas, because they're so important to our patients and our community. So in our 25 budget, we have allocated funds to continue this multi-year journey that we're doing with management systems.
How do you sense the team acceptance of Vizient is?
So Vizient is really acting as a coach, which is what we need. The whole idea is for us to be independent eventually in our journey, and for that we must learn. And this isn't about having a consultant come in and doing it for us. It's about teaching us how to do it ourselves. And in the areas of the ones that have really embarked heavily in this area, the Access to Care project, they all are seeing the benefit of following a management systems approach. The pediatrics clinic is a prime example of how things can really start working well and how change is possible. And they're kind of the poster child for some of our other areas to look to as we go through this journey. There are going to be people that are skeptical. You know, it's always, oh, it's the flavor of the month, right? But we're really hoping this gets embedded in the organization just like Just Culture did. It took us probably 10 years, and now Just Culture is, people are like, Just Culture? What is that? I'm like, well, you're doing it every day, so whether you know it or not. We want management systems to be the same way. You know, Tahoe Forest is unique in that we're one of the largest critical access hospitals in the nation, and we continue to grow, which is fascinating. And with that, we've had some interesting challenges with space and how to better serve our patients and provide space for our providers to serve those patients. So in 2024, we were able to acquire some additional spaces for us to operate in that we're going to be investing funds in 2025 to bring to fruition. So the old Rite Aid space right down the street. We have a location in Tahoe City. And then we just recently were able to open and operate the Martis Outlook locations out at the airport for ENT services, plastics, and audiology, where we're hopefully bringing that service back in line to serve our patients. So great things from that perspective. We've expanded hours and days of the week for certain services, so that's really helped make services available to our patients. And then we've had some new service line additions, such as the cardiac pacemaker program, that's defibrillators, right-sided heart catheterizations. We also have the telestroke teleneurology program, so we've been able to add additional needed services from that perspective. I would be mistaken if I did not mention the support we got from the Helmsley Family Trust. With the donation they were able to provide at Incline Village for us to update our CT scanner, X-ray, and we have added mammography over there, which we did not have that service before. So thank you to the Incline Foundation Board, as well as the Helmsley Family Trust. We were actually able to move $6.9 million just a couple of days ago to fund the infrastructure that we initially paid up front, and then they paid us back. So we're going to continue our journey in the replacement of our imaging equipment. You might have seen the mobile CT scanner out in the parking lot. We're replacing the CT scanner. We have other modalities on the horizon. We're going to be looking at fluoroscopy, nuke med, X-ray, PET CT. We're going to be upgrading the PAC system. And while we work on replacing these equipment needs, we're going to be also addressing some seismic issues that are required of us to do. And so it didn't make sense to do seismic and then try to go back and do the equipment. It is much more efficient to do them both at the same time. And that's what we're programming to do in 2025 and 2026. I would be remiss if I didn't mention IT. The number of cybersecurity attempts to hack us are ridiculous, like any other healthcare system in the nation. And I give great kudos to our team in protecting this organization. We're definitely still at risk. We're not 100% secure by any means, but we're going to continue to invest in that area within the health system to try to protect us as much as possible from those outside threats. We also have threats from the legislature point of view. We've talked about I'm going to only mention one because it's near and dear to my heart. Not really, but the Office of Healthcare Affordability. So they go by OCA, another acronym for us to have in healthcare. Love it. They actually have come out and solidified the statewide spending targets for the next 5 years. And so we'll talk about that a little bit when we get to the 10-year forecasts, and I'll hit on what they've come out with so far. And then lastly, we're 75 years old. How awesome is that? So I am not 75 years old, but the organization is, and what a great milestone to hit for this community, for this health system. And we definitely need to be sure we continue in 2025 the celebration of our 75 years. So that's kind of a look back and a look forward from the executive summary. And if you guys don't have any comments or questions, we can dive into what the fiscal year 25 budget looks like.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
It's more related to access and the properties that we're investing in developing for offices. In our summary here, it talks about the number of health providers. So we went from 115 in 2015. This is on page 1. Mm-hmm. Now we have 195 providers. So do we have that broken in so we know how many are physicians and how many are APPs?
Yes, we would have that. That's the medical staff roster. Mm-hmm. Some of those could be a little bit of telemedicine work that they do. People that aren't necessarily in clinics either, hospitalists, things of that nature. But yes, that's the growth we've seen.
The 195 includes like telemedicine or stroke telestroke?
Anybody providing
Okay.
service to Tahoe Forest.
That explains the number to me, so thank you for that.
Yes.
And then as far as behavioral health, currently, how many providers do we have there?
Oh, gosh, Scott. 6.
Because I understand we have someone coming on this summer.
Dr. Dillon is going to be joining us here shortly, and he'll be the medical director for the program. And we have a new operational director joining us, or just joined us. He might have just started. He was a previous employee of Tahoe Forest, but his name is Brian Parrish. And the two of them will be working very closely together through, in partnership with Vizient as well, to embrace the management systems and to work through a standardization of processes and really streamlining our behavioral health service.
Yeah, it's really good to hear, because my understanding is that behavioral health is still a great need in our community, and there are people that are really trying to get in and to really improve what their problems are or their issues are, and find it difficult when you can't get in.
Not only get in, but there's also some services we could probably add to what we're doing now or expand even more. And that's all about licensing space, putting it in the right location, making sure we have, it could be supported by the 340B program. So there are things we are going to be working on that should make a difference.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else before she moves on to the numbers?
Behavioral health, are they all psychologists or are they psychiatrists as well?
They're a mix. Most of them right now are LCSW social work level. We do have an incoming psychiatrist, and we do have a psychologist and development pediatrician at that level.
So if someone shows up at the ER for, what is it called, 5150?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Are they on call to assist in that treatment, or are they immediately transferred?
The responsibility for doing a so-called crisis evaluation
That's
works
the
part of the
county.
county responsibility, and they have specially licensed crisis workers who will present to the emergency department here or to Nevada for evaluation of those patients. And they have to come up with essentially a safety plan, which might involve putting them on a hold, 5150 hold, and then arranging for a transfer of those individuals. Or if they're safe to go home, then they're given resources to follow up with. So our folks could potentially see them as outpatients, although not always. But our providers are not deploying to the emergency department.
Dr. Evans, do we have a strong relationship with the county to do behavioral health beyond the 5150s?
I would say it works differently on the eastern side of the county than it does on the western side of the county. In this area, we have chosen to develop our own behavioral health services, and that's been the expectation of this community. And so that's exactly what we've done. I've got to hand it to Scott for really putting a huge amount of effort into rebuilding the department. It's been very difficult to manage it. On the western aspect of Nevada County, it really is left up to the county for the most part to do behavioral health. The county and also the FQHCs. That's
Yeah.
where most of the mental health care is provided. The hospital system there pretty much walks away from it.
Okay,
We do
thank you.
have a relationship with the county, of course. We actually just met with the county officials yesterday. We did talk about Ryan Gruber, and ultimately we have a relationship there. But as Dr. Evans just mentioned, we really are a bit of a bootstrap community up here, so we want to make sure that we have our own resources. But when things get challenging, we do reach out to the county. Sometimes that poses some challenges, but we talk through those issues. But behavioral health in general, there's a pretty strong opportunity here for us to get better in this space. So with the right leadership, I think we'll get there.
I have a quick question. Does behavioral health include addiction for alcohol and drugs?
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's a way to address those issues.
Yeah, it is one of the, sorry. Literally just told me to do this. And then I gotta-
Sure, it's on. Yeah, so it's one of the components of behavioral health, and actually, it's the service line that has the most disparate services within it, because you've got a number of different things: substance use and mental health disorders and counseling and all kinds of other things that are kind of folded into it. So it's different, I would say, than the other specialties.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Well, while you're up there, don't move away. So
You got the numbers.
you're just going back to the
Yeah.
the issues with abuse. Is there a relationship between our behavioral health and some of the 12-step programs that are in our community as a support when they're not seeing the therapist or the psychiatrist?
They absolutely refer patients to go to 12-step programs. They're an important part of recovery for many, many patients. And so they're part of the resources that are recommended by our behavioral health team to individuals that need that service. So yeah, we certainly try to connect people to whatever resources are available, including ones that are outside the health system.
Thank you.
I think I was just telling Louie, I think this sounds like a great topic that the board may want to put it on the agenda in a future meeting, just to get informed of what the services are, the providers we have, where we're trying to take the service line, and spend a little more time on it. Not that I want to get in the numbers, but we only have so much time.
Okay. Yeah, no, that'd be welcomed.
Yeah.
Are we ready to move forward?
We are.
All right, we're going to go to page 8. It's in the statement of revenue and expense section of your binder. I will be referring to the page numbers in the binder. That's just going to be the easiest way to do this than the board packet numbers. So stay with me if you can. So on page 8, the highlights, our gross revenue is being projected at $671.4 million. Our deductions from revenue are $356.6 million. Our other operating revenue is $20.4 million. The property tax revenues we utilize to support the wellness neighborhood is about $1.3 million, bringing us to our total operating revenue of $336.6 million. Just as a reminder, we all know in healthcare, what we bill is not what we get paid. And that's what that deductions from revenue line represents, is the amount of our gross revenue we end up writing off and not getting paid for, so.
Crystal, if I could stop
Sure.
you at the deductions from revenue. I pulled out the last 2 budget presentations and saw that right now that's 53% of this projected budget. Last year, it was 52%, the year before 51%. It's obviously a trend line.
Yes, sir?
Is it one that concerns you?
It is concerning, but probably what is more concerning is the Office of Healthcare Affordability. So as long as we can maintain our critical access hospital status and the growth in Medicare, and really utilizing our licensing structures such as rural health clinics and D as in dog clinics, that really supports the reimbursement we would get from the Medicare and the Medi-Cal program. In addition, the supplemental funding programs that were developed for district hospitals and working with the District Hospital Leadership Forum has really helped shore up our Medi-Cal reimbursement to at least get us closer to covering cost. So that's really helped. So as we start seeing a shift from commercial to Medicare and Medi-Cal, we've been working to make sure we try to keep those populations as stable as possible from a reimbursement point of view. What gets a little disturbing is the Office of Healthcare Affordability, who is dictating what we can do with our basically our net revenue increases. So that really, and they take into consideration the supplemental funding from the state programs as well. So we might see quite a bit of pressure of not being able to negotiate contracts, not being able to really see an increase in our reimbursement at all. So as we see increases in our expenses, which a lot of which we don't have any control over, inflation is inflation, the pharmaceutical companies are going to charge us what they're going to charge us, that's going to put a lot of pressure on this health system.
And the smaller health systems that are have a few days of cash on hand, are they going to go out of business? I mean, if we're doing as well as we're doing, but
That is
still-
a huge concern. Louis, I see you want to.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that's near and dear to me, of course, but yeah, I mean, there's absolutely a possibility of that, so that has been kind of probably the largest narrative against the Office of Healthcare Affordability. I think, every administrator out there is making clear statements that healthcare is very costly, but we have to be really careful on how we try to fix that issue. And I think that the smallest hospitals are probably the most vulnerable hospitals as this is implemented. And ultimately, what I expect to see here, and many others feel the same way, is there is going to be bumps in the road, and hopefully those bumps are not hospital doors closing.
Right.
So we'll see how things go.
And then, of course, we have other issues that put pressure on the revenues, like the new laws for financial assistance, expansion of the cap on the federal poverty level going from 350% to 400%, the revalidation process with the Medi-Cal population that's still going on, the ability for us to ask for information to determine means to pay, that's getting less and less available to us. So we're finding it's getting more and more difficult from a revenue perspective. And so that's why, one, we're embracing management systems, right? We need to create efficiencies, and we need to concentrate on our costs going forward because we're not going to get from our revenues. We're allowed to have growth in volume, and that's allowed, but not necessarily growth in reimbursement. To move forward, so total revenue we ended with $336.6 million. Our operating expenses are $311.8 million, leaving our EBITDA line, earnings before interest, depreciation, and amortization, at $24.8 million. Our non-operating expenses are targeted at 22.4, and our property tax revenues, which has been reduced just slightly by the 1.3 million on the wellness neighborhood revenue line, because we pull it up to support that program. So we're at 15.8 million, targeting a net income of almost 18.3 million for 2025. Last year's budget was targeted at 15.5 million, and I would like to point out 7 million of that was the donations from Incline that was generating that 15.5. So we do not have that level of donation in the 2025 budget. So we're looking to really invest heavily in the organization to help move us forward, and I still think an $18.3 million net income line allows us to reinvest properly when you get to the 10-year forecast, and we'll talk about that in a little while. We have left our charity care at 2% and our bad debt at 1.5%. Our deductions from revenue are 49.6. All that combined, Dale, as you already had said, has gone up from the previous year. Even though we haven't seen the level of financial assistance that we keep budgeting for, there is no indication to me why I should change that 2% and 1.5% number. There is nothing fabulous that has happened out in the economy that tells me I should lower those percentages, so I'm not going to. Our other operating revenue consists of programs such as, our retail pharmacy, the hospice thrift stores, the children's center, but it also includes the Medi-Cal QIP program that used to be called Prime, so that might ring a bell with you. And before that it was another name, so we're now at QIP is what they're calling it. That's right. DSRIP, the DSRIP program, right. So we have built in the reimbursement from the Prime program, not reimbursement, but for hitting quality indicators, we get so much money from that program. The hospital quality assurance fee program, and this last year in 2024 was the first year Nevada had come up with a provider tax program, and Incline in 2024 benefited from that program. Incline is considered a private hospital in the state of Nevada, where we're considered public in California. It's kind of weird. So we're not fully convinced. We will continue to benefit from that program. They're continuing to evolve it. So we did build in similar dollar amounts that we saw in 2024 for 2025 because they hadn't come out with their 25 projections yet to even give us a clue on how much to expect from this program for Incline Village. Salaries and wages, at the time we completed the budget, HR still hadn't compiled all the increases by job classification. So we ended up doing a 3% increase across the board, which is the minimum our agreements have stated. After talking to Jan Waters today, the average is more like about 4.5%. So we may see some negative variances if we fulfill all the FTE open positions by that increase beyond the 3% I had already put in the budget. So I wanted to make that transparent to the board. As for FTEs, in fiscal year '24, our overall FTEs was 1,088, and that includes the physicians. And now we're targeting for '25 about 1,157. That's a 68 FTE difference. Some of this is just flat out due to growth and volume. We just don't have. We need more people to do more volume. Some of it is the development of new departments, such as the Department of Business Intelligence. We didn't have that. That just got created in '24. And so those are new positions. We have a couple of new positions to help support the management systems work. So we've created that in there. The number of providers that are coming on board in fiscal year '25 generally are supported by at least an MA and sometimes a front office person, so at least 2 FTEs for a full-time provider that is joining us in the clinic setting. So we've tried to incorporate as much of that as we can. And with the addition of providers puts pressure on the support systems. So the Access Center, for example, the business office, there are additional purchase services for our coding services that have to come into play when we see that increase in volume. So from a budget '24 to a budget '25, I would consider it not a huge addition of FTEs. However, we had a lot of vacant positions in '24. So when you look at our actual projected FTEs for '24, it looks like we're adding a lot. We're not. We're just trying to continue to fill some of the open positions we've had for a while. I think you have a question, Michael. I can see it on your face.
I do. Well, I push my button too. I always had a number of like 1,300 in my head for
That's employees. These are FTEs, full-time
Okay, so that would
equivalents.
include a couple hundred part-time.
So we could have part-timers, per diems.
Thank you.
Yes. Moving to page 9, workers' comp is really a function of how many FTEs we have. So there isn't a whole lot there. We actually have a great workers' comp program that is partially self-insured, and we've been managing that quite well in this organization. So I'm not seeing a whole lot there. But the health insurance increases have been pretty significant, and we actually put in a 20.4% increase. And in 2024, we had seen some pretty high dollar claims, some of which exceeded our stop loss, so we get reimbursed from the stop loss insurance. But the trend isn't going down from that perspective, so we were a little more aggressive in our projections of the health insurance costs. Michael?
Nope.
Oh.
I had a quick question on that. Is there a way to actually project what those costs might be? I mean, it seems like every year would be somewhat variable, or is there a trend that's predictable?
So the health program, we are again partially self-insured. And so if we were premium-based, we could probably do those types of projections. But when it's based upon utilization and those that are coming on and off of our health insurance, it gets a little more challenging. We do work with Keenan and Associates, who helps us with our health insurance side. They're also our third-party administrator. We do review at least quarterly, the utilization of what's going on, trends we're seeing. Are we seeing more folks use places other than Tahoe Forest, which causes us to spend more on that health insurance line? Are there things we could do differently with the pharmacy program that could help reduce our health insurance costs? So we're evaluating we don't see patient names, but we see codes. So like we see the diagnosis, we see what the issues are, we see where they're seeking care, and we can see that type of utilization to see if we need to shift things around. So we do analysis over this, but it's purely a function of utilization and where they're going.
Right, okay, thank you.
Professional fees, we did increase it by 9.2%. Pro fees are really in two different categories. We have physician professional fees for those that are still contracted, and then we have just general professional fees, which is like for our audit firm or some firms that help support IT or other areas in the organization. So in our fiscal year 25 budget, we do have fees for IT. We're looking to implement hopefully a new phone system and communication system, and we're going to get assistance with that. We're probably looking at doing some, not probably, we are looking at doing some changes with our operating and the work we do with Mercy as well on the EMR system. So Microsoft 365, we're migrating to, and there's some other things we're doing around security that will help support IT in this area.
Crystal?
Yeah.
Over the years, we've absorbed physical therapy and TTMG and so forth. Any thought ever given to creating our own ER crew and as employees? Is that something that's ever talked about?
Feel free.
You know, I think, I'll just say, I think the current crew is doing a great job for us. And so that has not been high on our list to really look at. But ultimately, I think all things are, something that we need to reconsider each year. But I think currently, as Vituity is doing a good job for the health system and providing good patient care to the patients of the community, I think right now it's, again, not high on our list.
Not high on our list. Do we pick up the cost of their medical malpractice insurance, or is that something that's included in Vituity's charge?
Yes, but they're.
No, it's okay. Yeah, but we don't provide a stipend to this emergency department group, which is relatively unusual. It's mostly because of the payer mix is quite good here. And I'll just also comment, the trend for the last 25, 30 years has been independent groups being replaced by large national firms like Vituity, because it's operationally just becoming much more difficult for independent groups to function. There hasn't been a lot of direct employment in California of ER doctors. We certainly could do that, where other hospitals are limited in that. But I would not recommend we do that here at this point in time, because Vituity is doing a very good job.
We do supplement at Incline though, because that's a low volume location. So we do have a group that provides this service. We pay for them to provide 24/7 coverage, and in return, they provide us the collections on the accounts they serve. So it doesn't cover our cost entirely, but having them turn the collections over to us helps us keep that 24/7 coverage over at Incline.
Can I ask also about the telephone?
Yeah.
We've been working on that for several years. It seems like we heard this several years ago, and we were going to voice over computer or something.
Voice, VoIP.
VoIP, yeah.
Voice over internet protocol. Oh, no.
Feel free.
Perfect guy for the answer.
Yeah, there's the answer.
Yeah, so we have been working on this for a while, and then COVID happened, and we couldn't spend any money, so we delayed it, but it's to the point now where we should really move forward with
time.
it. Yeah.
Okay, so we've always been on the old system. We never tried anything else, or, okay.
No.
We have two systems. Still, all the calls going out are through a specific Cisco. It's called UCS. And it's been my goal to get rid of Cisco completely from our organization. We are on a separate system for the Access Center called Gemini, or Genesis. And that kind of tracks, it's a typical call center software. So we're looking at doing a unified communication system that has not only the help desk type Access Center, but it also integrates with Epic So when Alice calls, it's going to say, "Hey, Al, how you?" And it'll bring up your chart automatically for that person that's helping you. And if they have to transfer you over, it will ring Jake, and it brings up, "Hey, here's Alice's stuff," and they can do a warm handoff, a cold handoff. It does all kinds of cool text functionality, similar to things that we can do now with the Genesis system, but Genesis does not integrate natively into Epic like that. So we want to look into that, and Jan's not here. Jan and I have looked into, you may have been to hospitals where you see the caregivers wearing the little buttons on there. They're like walkie-talkies. The main company that does that is called Vocera. There's another hospital called Volt, VOALTE, that's in use in Reno, which I think is a better option because it can use any device. You don't have to buy the proprietary little either badges or around the neck lanyard attached devices, which I haven't met anyone that really says, "Oh, these are the best things ever." So if they could use their phone to do the same, and, it's just download this app, log in, and then you can, it'll show presence. If you're here in the hospital, it'll be green, or if you're at home, or if you're busy, it can yellow, red. So it's a really cool program, which will also integrate with Epic.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other IT questions for me? I'll be right there. Well, maybe I'll sit here.
Yeah, stick around.
Okay. Also within pro fees, we called it process redesign initiatives. That's management systems. So we've invested there. And then work we're doing around the physician employment and compensation. The board knows we've been looking at what can we do in that realm to make some changes. Supplies overall, we're looking at 11.2% increase. Part of that is obviously volume driven, but we've also incorporated a 5% increase for medical supplies, food, non-office, and then 10% for pharmaceuticals. I did mention the 340B program. Vizient is specifically going to help us look at the 340B program for behavioral health, but there are definitely some things we can do better within that program. It's a very complicated program, and I can tell you I am no expert in it, so please don't ask me any questions other than I know we can do better, so we can benefit more from this program. Purchase services, we're looking at a 12.9% increase. This is part of the support for that telephone system we talked about. Also our linen service, coding and billing, interpreters, snow removal, that all falls into this category. It's the nature of the beast here is inflation in those agreements. So I will tell you the IT agreements continue to climb. We did renew our agreement with Mercy, that had an inflationary factor in it. So there's a lot of those services that are hitting us with just contract increases.
Which we fight.
Everything's a negotiation. Other expenses, we're looking at a 3.2% increase. Part of that is utility costs. Again, inflation of 5%. Our insurance costs did go up by about $195,000 for risk directors and officers, comprehensive cyber crime, physician. We do have an increase of $511,000 in outside training and travel. I do want to point out this is the most discretionary category we have within the budget to say yes or no to. And there's a lot of times we say no. And so even though it looks like a $511,000 increase compared to projected 24, it's just because we chose not to do some of those things in 24.
Okay, I marked that because 511,000 is not a small number.
No.
And I didn't know what the actual number was last year. So when it says an increase, do you say increase from what, do you know?
Projected fiscal year 24.
Yeah, no, that's right. So this is the increase.
Yes.
Do you know how much it was last year?
Oh,
Like-
not off the top of my head, Dale. But the travel we're talking about here can be for like the board to go to, an ACHD event.
Yeah.
It's for me to go to the District Hospital Leadership Forum board meetings. But it's also for education and training of our management and staff. So the staff have MOU dollars available to them. They may or may not use those dollars. We usually allow at least one conference for our management team to attend. We prefer the West Coast. It tends to be less expensive. We encourage them to continue to get education in that area. We support tuition as well. And so all that kind of gets bundled into outside training and education. I do intend to have a few of my folks attend a certification program with Mercy. It's called the Builder Program. So when we start a new service line and we build it in Epic, Tahoe Forest from the back end doesn't get a seat at the table. The clinical folks have a little bit more of a seat at the table, but the back end doesn't. So I would like to get our revenue cycle folks through the Builder Program to where they sit at the table too on the back end. So when we build a new rural health clinic in the state of Nevada and this location, we know the rules were built right, because sometimes we're at the mercy of Mercy to get that right. So that's kind of why we build it, but we know if things are tight, we don't spend it.
I think there was a lot of pent-up demand, of course, with COVID. There was a lot of deferred education and training. So, of course, as Crystal said, we'll be responsible in this area, but I'm not at all surprised to see the growth
It's only
in this space.
$500, if you take FTEs, it's roughly 500 per, which is pretty light as an
Yes.
investment in training.
Sure.
I would think that.
We have to revamp our website this year. It has to be done based upon the platform it sits on, so we have dollars for that. Some minor marketing increases. We do plan for physician recruitment expenses. A little bit of rent for equipment, mobile CT. We got some imaging swap outs we're doing. And then we have our normal dues and subscriptions, and I will tell you, even in the dues and subscriptions, we're seeing increases in those costs. So from an expense perspective, that's what we're looking at. District and county taxes, we're budgeting at 11.8 million. I would say we tend to be maybe a little conservative in that area. We usually use about a 3.5% increase. But that could certainly exceed the 11.8 million. We're usually pretty close, though. Interest income, we've seen rates between 4.7 and 4.98%, so pretty phenomenal. LAIF is beginning to catch up to that, by the way. But as for 2025, we did take a slight decrease, and that was for funds held with Chandler. So we're being conservative. I think that's the best thing I can say to you on that. Donations, about 1.3 million. And then, of course, we have other line items such as the joint venture in the surgery center, the gain or loss from market investments. We are looking at higher depreciation costs, and interest expense was decreased, but I do want to talk to you about, I believe, at the end of 2025, we're going to want to investigate a municipal lease. And the municipal lease interest expense is not built into 2025 because it hits more in 2026, but will benefit from that funding in 2025. So we'll hit that when I get to like the cash flow statement.
And this is to cover gateway renovation?
Actually, it's more of the imaging. So it's the CT, the fluoro, the nuke med, the X-ray. That's stuff I would propose doing it in 2 chunks. We'll do about a $3.5 million at the tail end of 2025 and about a $4.5 million in 2026. The rates are pretty reasonable. The lease companies are hungry. I probably get at least 3 calls a day from a lease company. And I have primed Gary Hicks to work with us. Even though he's retired, there's a select few clients he'll still work with. We are one of them. So he's fully prepared to assist us in locating, providing the board information and guiding us through the process and finding us the best rates. So
The companies that you purchase this equipment from offer,
they do, but it's usually not as competitive as what I can get. Yeah. So that's kind of a cursory brush of all the categories within the income statement for 2025. Any questions regarding that? On page 13 is Incline Village, and for Incline, we are targeting about a $5.7 million net income, and that is down from 2024, but that is purely really due to that donation line. That's just not going to be as much as it was in the previous year. So that's still a pretty hefty target for Incline to reach, but we're hoping with the GI services over there and the expansion or adding the CT and adding mammography, we have the opportunity to hit that. Behind page 13 are kind of what we call the SBUs. They're in there for your information only. I don't really plan to review them. And we'll probably move to a couple of other sections just to hit some highlights if the board is okay with that.
you know, you brushed past page 11, and I just had a question there. If I
Page
could.
11. Okay.
Yeah. Projected, charity care was projected for '24. And I'm looking at the huge discrepancy between it and the budget of '24, and then it bounces back up in '25, and I just wondered.
So we're going to have to talk about the process a little bit here. So when we have patients that have self-pay balances, we put an element of a reserve against those in this category. If they don't apply and carry through with that process, we've reserved more than we actually have used. Charity care accounts can span 2 or 3 years before we work through the full process. So where we might have reserved for accounts 2 years ago, and we finally got to the point of fruition where we either approved it, partially approved it, the numbers don't always match. So what you're seeing is basically an over-reserve and an underutilization of the program. But this was back to my argument of, based on the economy and what's happening with Medi-Cal revalidation and high deductible plans, I'm really not willing to drop my percentage, Dale. You can argue with me all you want, but I'm going to tell you no.
I'm just looking at they're significant numbers.
You know, I mean, I have the same note. I mean, if you look historically, it's 13 million, 15, 15, 13,
Yeah.
and then 63,000,
Yes.
That's where I'm going.
which is,
So we did benefit back from back when President Obama was in place and we had the expansion of coverage. So some of that has helped us with the charity care component of things. But also, people have also started migrating more to high deductible plans. Matter of fact, I just had one come across my desk today. They had insurance coverage. They were in our ED. They still had $7,000 out-of-pocket cost and only made $60,000 in a year. I mean, you're still going to have applicants that go down that path.
Yeah, okay. But no reason particularly other than that, why you projected a budget at 11,000.
11 million.
Or, excuse me, 11 million, and then we had 63,000.
I will tell you, the number of applications that come across my desk are not huge. Just in the last month, I probably approved 25, but throughout the year, there's like 5 here, 5 there. It is very difficult to, I don't want to say to get our patients to cooperate, but if you have to think what they've been through, going through an application process is not at the top of their mind. So that's why we have our financial counselors that try to follow up and follow up and follow up. But if they don't supply the information we need, I can't qualify them. So,
but in years past, they did apply. in much bigger numbers. I mean, that's the big difference I think we're looking
Yeah,
at.
and
right?
next
Like-
year, you think they will apply, obviously, because you've got,
Well, so you got to remember, a component of our charity program is to support the Cancer Center. So those that have had a very catastrophic diagnosis, that are going to have years of medical bills and years of out-of-pocket costs. So we have that component within here to support that. The Cancer Center is great at finding alternatives to help support our cancer patients. So even though we prepare for that, doesn't mean we always end up having to use that. So I guess what I'm trying to tell you, Dale, is it's a function of utilization, and I can't always predict what that utilization is going to be. But based upon the economy and knowing we have high deductible plans, knowing that people are struggling financially, that we have a re-verification process still going on with the Medi-Cal program, that we still don't know what the outcome of that's going to be, it's going to happen. And it's a matter of when. In addition, the charity care policies have expanded to those that will qualify. It used to be capped at $350, we're now at $400. It used to be only for emergency situations. Now it's emergent, urgent, and possibly even elective now. So the state law expanding those programs is going to put demand on this. I just couldn't tell you when,
yeah,
but I'm waiting for it.
if you wait for it.
Take a look at bad debt as well, right? So you can see bad debt, even 19 was just about 2.5 million, and, projected for this year at 7.6 million. So, I mean, to Crystal's point, obviously you have to go through a process to get charity care, but looks like at times where maybe some folks are not going through the process, and potentially it's ending up in the bad debt side, I think.
Yeah, that I understand.
Well, and those laws have
There
changed
isn't a
too.
major variance in those numbers
Sure.
as you look across the column. I hope you're satisfied, Louis, that 63,000 jumps back up to 13 million.
So just know that's a variable. That could either help us by the time we hit the end of the year if we don't have applicants, or if we have a lot, I haven't budgeted enough. So it's like I don't want to be overly conservative and put double that, maybe I need to put 4% in there. But, we know we're going to have some. It's just, we don't know how much. And the amount of self-pay we carry, or what is still the remaining amount that's the patient responsibility in the accounts receivable, is significant. So that could easily turn into charity care.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if there's anyone debating that budgeting for that number, or even a bigger number, perhaps, is probably, it's still trying to understand why this year the projected is, 12, 13 million lower than it has been historically year over year.
So the reserves that we have put in versus what the application actually ends up being is drastically different.
No, I understand that. But is that the case every year?
It is, but, so every year you're looking at probably has the previous 3 years of accounts we're assessing. So it's a carry forward and reserve process. So if there are accounts from the Cancer Center that are 3 years old that we've been reserving on, and there's a different payment mechanism for them that didn't qualify them from charity care, then we're removing that reserve, and that's dropping the actual amount of the charity care expense. So it's a multi-year estimation versus actual projection.
You share the same concerns I do.
Yeah, no, but I'm tracking the way you're explaining it.
Yeah.
I mean, like, Liberty Utilities sometimes does the same thing. It's like, hey, we've been projecting what your electrical, and all of a sudden you get this big hit.
Yeah.
Wrong.
Well, our projections were off, and
Yeah.
so there's sort of a big correction, if you will.
And it's a correction of multiple years. That's what I'm wanting you to understand. It's not like this is a correction of only 2024.
Understood, okay.
Right. Okay, one last question on page
Sure.
11 there. I see, we are going to take the full hit for the Institute for Rural Health Research
Yes, sir.
this year. Okay. There was no, did you discuss that with Moss Adams, and
They're very aware.
they're aware, and there's no, portion it out over years? There's no reason to, I guess, huh?
No, dead is dead.
Okay.
Just staying down page 11,
Yeah.
just a quick narrative on salaries, wages, et cetera. When I look at it, I know my math is absolutely rough and crude, basically taking total expense by FTEs to get sort of an average FTE expense. It jumps up, if you look year over year, back in 2019, it was 121, then 127, 136, 161, 173. So the numbers may be off, but I think the percentages or the trend would be there as an increase. And if we look at percent of revenue, it also jumps up over the last couple of years. And when we compare that to the averages at critical access hospitals across California, we're significantly higher. Like average FTE salary is like 76,000 across California. I know we live in a high rent district, but can you just help understand sort of why we're seeing those significant jumps over the last couple of years in particular?
Gain sharing program.
Okay.
Oh, gain sharing, yeah, that's right.
So you look at the net income and like the audited 23 net income of 22 million, but that's been reduced by the pre-gain share, pre-incentive comp numbers that we utilize to determine if gain sharing is going to be paid and how much, as well as management incentive comp. So then that gets calculated, it gets accrued in that fiscal year, which reduces that net income number. So back in, I can't remember, do you remember how long gain sharing's been around?
How long more can
Yeah. So even with the gain sharing program, we've had some pretty decent net incomes. And projected 24, we have not booked any gain share or director incentive comp in these numbers yet. So assuming we still have a stellar year like I'm projecting, once those get calculated, it'll reduce that 38 million down to by whatever we end up paying out under the calculation of that program. So that's part of it. The salary survey information that HR uses has been, the criteria for the staff has been negotiated, so it's based upon certain regions, this number of categories. Alex could speak to that. And so that's what we use to establish our competitive wages for our staff. And so that like to like is just pure wage. And then anything we pay in addition to that makes our salaries and wages higher than what others. I don't know a whole lot of hospitals that have a gain sharing program like we do.
Yeah. And the gain sharing is calculated on the amount over the budget that we succeed in getting, correct?
Yes, and the criteria has changed. Back when, in the day, when we were like $4 or $5 million net income numbers, that was kind of the minimum of what we had to hit before gain sharing would kick in. We've exceeded that several times since then, and that was no longer a logical target anymore because the organization couldn't reinvest in future years if we were only just making $4 million. So that criteria got changed. So if we hit budget, that creates a percentage of the net income to create a pool. So say that pool is like $1.5 million. Then that $1.5 million gets distributed to each staff member to where basically every employee gets the same percentage of that $1.5 million. Right. The better the net income, the higher that percentage grows. So right now, the max is a 9% of net income gain share distribution. And if we truly hit 38 million, we'll be doing a 9%. So I'll take whatever the net income number is, times it by 9%, that creates a pool, and that pool is what gets distributed to the staff. But on top of that, you have employer taxes, and you have retirement contributions that come into play. So that salary, wage, and benefit line is all of those combined.
Okay. But it does benefit the individuals who participate in gain sharing for us to budget as low as possible and then beat that budget by the highest significant amount.
It does, but I can tell you that is nowhere in my thought process when I am creating this budget. Nowhere in my thought process.
We're not gaming the system?
We're not getting, no,
I am not.
yeah,
Matter of fact, I get heartburn every time. Oh,
yeah, okay. Just bringing it up.
does that make sense, Michael?
Yeah, no, I was just hoping to get a little narrative, because it's
Sure.
significantly higher when I look at, other critical access hospitals across the state.
And physicians are in there too. A lot of other places aren't employing physicians, so are in,
Definitely not at the
Excuse
same level, of course,
Yeah.
right? And
Yes.
so when you look at the critical access hospitals across the state, there's currently 34, I believe, 35 maybe. They're also located in a lot of cases, much lower cost of living areas, right? So I think that that's probably, factored into this in terms of how we have to be competitive with salaries and wages in a higher cost of living area that competes with the Reno market and, of course, Sacramento market.
yeah, the physician compensation not being on the professional fee line really has, when you do that calculation, really has brought that up quite a
Skews
bit.
it, yeah.
Yeah, and their bonus structure, if they're being very successful in the work they do, will also bring that number up. So there's a variety of differences compared to what I would say kind of that are what you would compare us to average.
That's helpful. Yeah, not questioning it, just seeking to understand, so appreciate
Yeah,
that.
no problem.
I am too.
How we doing?
Good.
Can we move to a different section?
Let's go.
All right. Just very quick on volume, page 22 in the volume section. We did kind of bring down ICU med-surg a bit. We have seen kind of a drop in our inpatient utilization, so we didn't get overly aggressive with that, but we did bring that down just slightly. You'll see that surgical services minutes are up quite a bit, and that's really based upon the cases too. We're budgeting 63 more cases than we did the previous year, which turns into number of minutes in the OR. Second floor, the cancer center, those services, we are expecting increase. The GIGS is really driving that. That's Dr. Singh, who is joining us, another GI doc, so that's driving volume there. We did go a little conservative on behavioral health, only 125 visits, but we do expect Dr. Dillon to generate additional volume when he joins us.
Sports medicine, I was surprised to see that drop so much.
Well, there's an explanation, that was. because
Yeah,
we lost
Dr. Holman left us,
Yeah,
and so what we brought the volumes for 24 down, they came down because Dr. Holman left,
Right.
and the new provider doesn't start till later in the year.
but we also have Naomi over there at Albertson
Albertson, yeah.
Incline, who's sports medicine.
That's a different cost center. So this is Tahoe Forest, this is an incline,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Doesn't include it.
Yep. But talking of incline, if you go to the next page, page 23, mammography.
Okay.
You'll see the line for mammography there, the new service line. And right on these pages, we're not highlighting every department. We're selecting some that we have noticeable changes on. If you wanted to, we could go to, for your question, Dale.
Well, I thought she was going back and forth between, a number of these physicians go back and forth, do they not, between
So,
Incline and Dawson?
page 36. The second line down is Incline Orthopedics and Weekend Walk-In. This is Albertson, Jernick, and Lamac, and so we are showing a 25% increase in those numbers. So I just didn't highlight it on the first two pages.
Okay.
Okay. Page 40, gross revenue. I just wanted you to take a quick peek at the payer mix. We are bringing up Medicare slightly. Medi-Cal, we're keeping about the same, and we are dropping commercial. So that's also what's driving that deductions from revenue percentage to go up, is because we are adjusting the payer mix slightly for those shifts.
Again, I went back to projected 2023, it said 37.5% for Medicare. Now, going up to 39%, budgeting up to over 40%.
Mhm.
So you're expecting some pretty good shift there
Mhm.
over a longer period of time.
I know I'm not getting younger, are you?
Yeah, I am.
That's just going to be the trend, I think, that we're going to continue to see in our population, so,
Yeah, really,
yeah.
okay.
Follows the trend line for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely does. Let's see. On page 45, deductions from revenue, the only thing I really want to point out on this page is there is a new program as a district hospital we are going to be participating in, and that's the Designated Public Hospital Directed Payment Program. We were able, in working with the District Hospital Leadership Forum, they were able to secure $200 million in funding for district hospitals under this program. And we expect to benefit to the tune of about $2 million from that program in its first year. The forum is going back to see if we can negotiate that $200 million for hospitals up higher before the Office of Healthcare Affordability kicks in. So there's strategy behind it, because if it's already in place, then what they're looking at is from that moment in time forward, not what happened backward. So there is an additional about $2.5 million from these supplemental programs that reduce those deductions from revenue, because they're considered supplemental reimbursement for the Medi-Cal population.
We're very lucky to have Crystal very active in that board down there, because that board is a board that actually makes significant changes for district hospitals in the state. So
Yeah.
we're lucky to have Crystal down there.
I feel like we've already beat up the FTE section, so I'd like to jump to cash flow, if that's okay.
Cash flows.
Okay. So at the time of writing this, we were projecting 2024 to end at about 166.9 million, or 214 days. After completing May's financials, if you were to look in your board packet for the next meeting, that actually is projecting now about 178.5 million and 228 days. So just from the time we published this, we're already seeing changes in these numbers. The main reason for this is we again had a fabulous month of May, and the construction projects that we were anticipating, those costs are greatly, the cost of the construction isn't lower, just the amount of expense we had in 2024 is lower. So it hasn't impacted the cash like we thought it would. So with that being said, I was going to tell you the 2025 forecast is for 169.1 million, or 197 days. If I were to use the May projected numbers from the board packet, we're actually looking at 180.7 million, or 210 days. So as we finish off fiscal year 24, 25 will change, because I'm guessing at how we're going to end 24, if that makes sense to you. Okay. I also want to point out that in the cash flow, I did incorporate those municipal leases that I mentioned earlier. We'll talk about that. And we did update the S&P days cash on hand numbers, and you'll see a BBB minus is 136, A minus is 234, and AA plus is 426. So we are inching our way closer and closer to our 5-year winning aspiration on this particular indicator to be close to that A minus threshold. On the statement of cash flow, which is the next page, page 57, there are 2 lines highlighted in yellow. There is the 2018 muni lease. So this is where the cash flow takes into consideration principal and interest payments on a newly issued municipal lease. That first one is $3.5 million with a 5-year term. And then in 2026, I would, and you'll see this in the ratios in the forecast, $4.5 million over a 7-year term. This, like I stated earlier, would help us pay for all the imaging equipment and some of the equipment that's in the capital listing that we could also incorporate into the municipal lease. We haven't finalized the list of everything we want to put in there, but I figure roughly between two leases, we're going to do 8 million, and we could potentially do a third lease, all under the same master lease, for an additional 4 or 5 million. We have the capacity to do this. It will help fund those things that aren't construction, so we can use the cash reserves for those building projects, which usually require greater amounts of debt and longer terms. So if we were to finance construction, it's probably going to be more like 90 to 100 million in a 30-year term, where these are shorter timeframes, and the lease rates right now are pretty competitive. So I don't want to say it's free money, because there's no such thing, but the interest rate is pretty decent from what Gary was telling me in the last couple leases. He was working on one at that time that he said was out in the market. So I do believe this is a great way to balance investment in our health system, not taking on a lot of debt and allowing us to maintain our cash reserves for those construction projects that are coming down the line. So I do plan to bring this forward to you soon in fiscal year 2025 for education, and then kind of review and hopefully at some point approval. So it is built into the cash flow.
So if I could understand.
Sure.
We do have some construction projects coming up.
Yes.
Are we presuming that we would borrow money at a higher rate for those construction projects than the cost of a municipal lease for this equipment?
Well, we're going to pay greater interest no matter what on those construction projects, because they're going to be 30-year terms, and they're going to be revenue bonds.
Yeah.
And so the amount of interest you're going to pay on a revenue bond over 30 years is going to be significantly more than interest you're going to pay on a 5-year municipal lease.
Okay.
Just period. Yeah. So the two lines, the debt service line, the first line shows you kind of my estimated debt payment, and it is just an estimate of principal and interest. And it wouldn't start until that third quarter or January of 2025. And then there's a second line highlighted, and I would expect that we would have about 2.2 million that would get funded in 2025 to offset equipment costs. So it kind of neutralizes that cost of equipment. And like I said, once we finish fiscal year 24 with a final ending unrestricted cash number, that will carry forward to 2025 as the beginning unrestricted cash number, and this will recalculate. But I'll be happy to share that with you when we finish off 2024. All right, in the interest of time, I would suggest we jump to the ratio analysis and financial forecast section. This shouldn't, this is me projecting 10 years into the future, so give me some grace, please. All right, and I'm sorry, the colors didn't really work as well as I was hoping on the copier when I did this. If you were to look at page 64, please. It looks great on the screen. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, but on paper, not so much. So, these are the ratios that we have agreed are the most meaningful and are assessed or critically scrutinized in bond ratings. And so what I wanted to try to demonstrate here, and you have the super dark yellow, and then you have what looks like a pale yellow. That was supposed to be green.
Not even close.
And then down on the AR section, that kind of pinky color was supposed to be red.
Okay.
Okay, so the pale yellow means the ratio in those years are actually within the A- to AA+ range based upon the current data I have from S&P. The ones that are red means they're out of BBB- to the A, they're below they're below the range. So definitely have some work to do on our AR days is what that's telling us until we get out to 2028, which I expect improvements, so. And then anything that's just bright yellow means it's between triple B minus and A minus. It's in a reasonable range. We're not violating our triple B minus policy with those ratios. So the only one that's causing us, or me, heartburn, is the days in AR right now, which we know we need to address. But even with the municipal lease and the projections going out 10 years, we're showing that we're doing a very good job of moving us towards that A minus bond rating for all the ratios, not just days cash on hand. So how did I get, this excess revenue over expense or net income going forward? Well, I'd like to spend just a moment on page 67. So page 67 shows you what you've already seen, projected 24, budget 25, and then we start playing around with 26 and beyond. In fiscal year 26, I am still recommending a 5% rate increase to our charge master, and I am also expecting a little bit more increase in the outpatient just due to volume. So 5% on the inpatient, 6% on the outpatient of increases to our revenue. The Office of Healthcare Affordability has come out with what they're saying is the spending target. Spending targets to them is net revenue to us. So in 2025, which is not an enforceable year, they're saying that they're going to allow a 3.5% growth. 3.5% net to us is about 7% gross. So we're about 50%. In 2026, we still have a 3.5%. In 2027, we have a 3.2%. 2028, 3.2%. In 2029, 3%. So they started with 3.5, they're ending with 3. Those are the next 5-year spending targets for us. Starting in 2026, if we exceed 3.5% as that target, then we can be penalized. They'll start with a plan of correction, fix it, you can't have this much. If you don't do that, then you're going to move into financial penalties and other ramifications.
And this is just in the charge master.
Yes, because the way they plan to measure this is based upon payments via claims. And so claim payments are our net revenue. Right. And so they're going to analyze claims data to see if we've exceeded these percentages. That's hypothetically what they're playing with right now. That they have not pinned down exactly what they're doing. So they're making a lot of decisions very quickly without a lot of process behind it.
So we're not going to be penalized for growth in volume.
Don't know. That's been brought up. There was a lot of argument about these percentages that they don't take into consideration the level of inflation healthcare has seen, nor new drugs that might come on the market that could be quite expensive, or any of the, I was going with technology infrastructure that we have to do, and then unfunded mandates. Yeah. So they're not adjusting any of this for anything like that coming down the line. They're just saying, this is it. So I did 5% in 2026 and 6% because I'm being conservative.
Yep.
And I'm saying that's going to turn into a 2.5 or a 3% increase to net revenue. When we get out to 2027, 2028, I'm using 4.5%, which will be about 2.25. And in 2029, all the way out to 2034, I'm using 4%, which is about a 2%. Now, that can change net revenue-wise, also based upon your payer mix. So there's variables in here, which is why I went conservative on those percentages, because they don't know what they're doing yet. So those are the gross revenue projections I pushed out. And then from deductions from revenue, if you look at page 68, there's a contractual adjustment as a percent of gross revenue line. You can see I started pushing that up. So I'm being pretty conservative on the amount of net revenue we're actually going to generate going out 10 years. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry, which particular line are we?
Contractual adjustments as a percent of gross revenue. So I keep pushing that percentage up, meaning we're going to have less net revenue out 10 years.
Yeah.
So I put those into our forecasts. Salaries, wages, and benefits, except for 2026, which I used 5%, I used 3% the rest of the years. Workers' comp and medical insurance, I'm using kind of a developed ratio based upon salaries and wages to try to project those numbers out. Pro fees, I've increased 3% per year every year. Supplies have growth in the percentage based on inflation. So that's been taken up each year for 10 years. Purchase services, 3%, and other 3%. So that's 3% each year, every year, going out to 10 years. So that's created our EBITDA lines. You can see it slowly starts to decline. And then also within here, in our non-operating section, in the interest expense, in this particular one, where it's just the municipal leases, I have the muni lease interest in these projections. So these are the projections I've used to go calculate the ratios with that show us that we're in pretty good shape for 10 years if we follow this plan. On top of that, I projected the cash flow. Cash flow is on page 69. And this is where you see the 2026 7-year muni lease kick in. And then you can see how it runs out on the two light yellow. Again, that was supposed to be green. If you take those out, they finally disappear after that 7-year mark and the debt is gone. And this has produced pretty decent days cash on hand. It's not as good as A-, but we have good stability while still investing in the construction projects that Dillon has for the next 10 years. This isn't the original master plan that was millions and millions and millions of dollars, because that whole conversation has changed quite a bit with the town and multiple story buildings and all that kind of stuff. So right now, that 10-year plan is things we know we can do and plan to do, and not magical multi-story, multi-million-dollar buildings. So I feel pretty good about no increase in debt other than the leases. What we're projecting out for 10 years, I feel like the stability is pretty decent. But I also wanted to show you, what if we tried to keep our days cash on hand up to that A- rating? And that's the second set of documents starting on page 70. This is where I've pulled in $95 million of new debt. And that new debt is 30-year debt to help fund construction. And if you look at that ratio page on page 70, there's more bright yellow than light yellow, which means going and getting that debt, even though it pushes our days cash on hand back up to the A- rating, it lowers some of the other ratios to where they're not as strong anymore as we are without the $95 million in debt. So I only did this as a demonstration of taking on some significant long-term debt if we were trying to fund those construction projects. And at this point, I wouldn't recommend it because it doesn't help us from a ratio perspective. It might help our days cash on hand, but that's about it. So that's really the purpose of these forecasts, is to kind of show you where we're at, what we look like going forward. There is affordability to do the things in the 10-year capital plan. If we stay on track with the net income numbers I've projected, our ratios are moving in the direction we want, which is A-, and I think we have a pretty good plan.
When do we retire the revenue bond debt for this Western edition? Do you know offhand?
Oh, gosh.
Is that a 40-year bond?
Is that
They're 30-year.
30-year?
30?
Yeah. They start dropping off. So the 2017 drops off after 2032. So we don't have that debt anymore in 2033 or 2034. And then the 2015 revenue bond ends in 2033.
Okay, so that goes away.
And let's see, we only have the 2017 and the 2015 left. So the debt that the district is actually responsible for through operations is actually quite minimal. The greatest amount of debt we have is the general obligation bonds, which are funded through the property tax revenues. And so S&P does look at these calculations with and without, because they know technically the property taxpayers are paying the GO bond. So they look at our strength with and without the GO bond. Any questions about the forecast? I know it's a lot to digest, but I think the assumptions I'm going to say are reasonable for what I know today, and that the amount of actual construction we intend to do over, really it's the next 7 years, because if you looked at the capital when we got into the last 3 years of the 10-year forecast, we just put placeholders because we don't have any projects going out that far. But I did build in about 15 million each year for those remaining 3 years at the 20, 31, 32, and 33, I think, or 32, 33, and 34. So we really have the ability to execute on those projects that we have laid out for the next 7 years.
You know, the interesting thing is that the town may have done us a favor by killing our general plan. And I have to say, the ingenuity of the people that have worked out, Dylan and Louis and others, they've just done brilliantly in finding space at a much lower cost. And that's the difference between the projections we were looking at even a year ago and what we're able to achieve now. So I just have to say, kudos to admin and the people that have been able to put that together, because it's changing our financial picture and making us viable in a way that we wouldn't have been before.
Yeah, definitely had to pivot.
Is that the key? Because I'm looking, this time last year, we were looking at some, what I might
Massive.
categorize as doom and gloomy. I mean, like
Yes.
negative cash,
Yes.
negative days cash to now 150, 100. But we're also, and I completely understand and appreciate the art of forecasting. But we're looking at about 100 million in increased gross revenue in 33. What
So,
change in your assumptions there?
Last year, I didn't know what the Office of Healthcare Affordability was doing, so I went much more conservative on the revenue growth because I didn't know.
Yep.
And so that was one thing we did. The other thing, I'm not sure which page you're looking at, but when I incorporated the amount of debt it would take to truly execute those huge projects in capital, that came with a lot of interest.
Okay.
And so that's another thing.
I'm looking at the no new debt from last year.
Yeah.
Both of those. Okay, so that's very conservative assumptions last year. We have a little more information now. It can be more accurate there. And then just a quick question on the salary. You'd said 3%, kind of year over year looking into the future.
Mm-hmm.
Does that include headcount increase, or is that just
That's just a
flat?
salary, that's us staying at 1,188 FTEs with
For
a
the next 10
3%
years.
each
Okay.
for 10 years. Yes.
But
So
it's assumed if we do add additional people, we also add additional services and additional income that comes from those.
Well, I would hope so, because the focus going forward is going to be expense reduction, because we will be very limited on what we can do with our revenues.
Yeah, we're going to have to be very efficient as we move into this next 10 years. But, clearly there's always the possibility that we might see what I would see is also like an unfunded mandate to hire on additional people to keep up with regulations. We know we're going to come. Nothing tells us that regulations are going to slow down by any means in healthcare. So I think we're just going to have to be, as Crystal said, very efficient over these next 10 years to really end up in a positive place at the end of these 10 years.
Yeah.
And if Vizient does help us improve our productivity, that could have a big impact on what's going on here as well, is it not?
Correct, because some of the access to care projects, like just one small example, we looked at the process of the MA. And what the MAs have to do that can be very different by provider and actually different by MA was eye-opening. And one of the projects is to really kind of standardize the process of the MA. So no matter if that MA is working with Dr. Barta or working with Sam Smith, it won't matter from a primary care to primary care. They'll have a standardized process. That helps prevent some of the hiccups that we see with the number of patients we can actually get seen. Because the more efficient those processes are for the provider, they're able to be much more efficient in their time and see more patients per day. So those are the types of things we're hoping to get out of the work we're doing with management systems. I know we're at time, but I have one last thing I have to talk to you guys about because you're going to be asked to approve it. So I had built a 5% rate increase into our CDM. If the Office of Healthcare Affordability isn't reason enough for you to approve that rate increase, in the back of your binder on page 80, we always do a comparison of ourselves on our revenue per visit or revenue per discharge. We look at all hospitals, all California district hospitals, all California rural hospitals, and then we look at ourselves. And this is a snapshot of the same time frame. So it's not like I'm using 2022 for them and 2024 for us. This is the same time frame for everyone. So you can see our gross inpatient revenue per discharge is lower than any category. And what that's telling me is we have room in our rate structure compared to what other hospitals are doing. On page 81 is our outpatient revenue per visit. We are slightly higher than California rural hospitals, but we're still below district and all California hospitals. All, again, the same time frame of comparison. We further break it down on page 82 and 83, where it shows actually by we consider our cohort of hospitals that we work with and are surrounded by. And we are on the very tail end on the gross inpatient revenue per discharge. And we're pretty competitive with Sutter and with Mammoth, with the other facilities being quite a bit higher. And then if you go to the next page, it's the outpatient revenue per visit. Sutter's a little whack. I don't know if there was a problem with their data, but that I kind of want to take that one out of the mix. But again, if you look at us compared to the other facilities in the statewide average, we're not too off the mark either. Page 84. The super yellow is what would be our new rates with the 5% increase. And I compare those new rates to what's currently available on these hospital websites for their charge master. So because of the pricing transparency laws and hospitals having to post their CDMs publicly now, it allows me to go do a fairly current comparison. And you'll see that Tahoe Forest compared to Barton or Sutter or Marshall and Dignity, for the most part, we are lower. If it's blue, that means we are lower. If it's yellow, that means we are higher. And our TSH screening has just always been in the category. It's one of the lab tests we're higher than most other facilities.
I got to say, though, this, if I remember correctly, shows more blue than in previous years.
It's been, so prior to the pricing transparency law, the only place I could get pricing information was to go out to the OSHPOD, which is now HCI website, and retrieve 2-year-old information. So this allows us to do a little bit more real-time comparison than what we've been able to do prior to that law. The next page is us compared to Nevada. And we just can't compete with that. It's a different state, different regulation, different rules, different staffing requirements, different seismic requirements. I mean, the whole gamut. So we're just not there. But the next page, page 86, The 8 hospital average kind of mushes those 4 California hospitals and the 2 Nevada hospitals together just to see still where we stand on average. We're still pretty good. And that's with the 5% rate increase that I'm proposing. So I'm hoping this provides you a little bit of comfort. I know we get a lot of complaints that we're super expensive and we're high priced. All I can say is healthcare is expensive, healthcare is high priced. But us compared to other facilities that our patients could go to, I think we're doing pretty darn good. So as part of your motion, I will be asking you to approve a 5% rate increase effective August 1st.
Just a question on that. You know, given that we're going to have restrictions in the future, would there be any consideration of maybe going to 6%?
No, because then we violate our contracts.
Yeah.
So we're
Well,
like,
we don't violate it. We can do that, but we have to notify the health plans and they'll reduce our reimbursement rate.
I see, so 5, there's kind
We're
of a ceiling.
allowed 5% without any impact to our reimbursement percentage.
I see, okay,
Pretty standard.
yeah, that answers that.
Yeah. And that, everyone, which I didn't think would take an hour and a half, is the budget presentation for 2025.
So what are you asking us of today?
I'm sorry?
What do you need from us today?
2 motions.
So I think one
Motion
is,
approving the fiscal 2025 budget inclusive of a 5% rate increase effective August 1st, 2024.
Okay, so that's where that's added.
you wrote that motion out, right? I thought I reviewed it so they knew exactly what they needed to say. Yeah. So, yeah, we need.
One of us to make a motion on that, right?
That's the first motion we would look for. And then the next one is CMS requires us to have a board-approved 3-year capital plan. And so that's the second item I would ask for you to make a motion and approve.
Okay, good.
I will move, we accept the first motion.
And this is a motion to accept the fiscal year 2025 budget with the 5% increase as of August 1st, 2024?
Correct.
Can I have
I'll
a
second that motion.
Okay. So it's moved and seconded regarding the fiscal year 2025 budget. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So the budget with the increase has been approved. Now we move on to our second motion, that is the 3-year capital plan, fiscal year 2026 to 2028. Can I have a motion?
I'll move approval of a capital plan.
A second?
Okay, so but it's moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So both of those
Thank you.
have been approved for you. Okay, there was no closed session, so this meeting's adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay, also, for your work and your whole team.
Mary, see you at 4.